Pat Dickinson, thank you very much for taking the time to share what you know about your brother Jack Lively and to share also some of your own story. Um, let's just start with what do you know about the circumstances surrounding Jack becoming a military service member listed as missing in action?
Well, I don't know anything about the outcome. That's the hard part. But
Yeah.
he enlisted in the Navy about 2 weeks before his 19th birthday.
Wow.
And he was sent to Great Lakes, Illinois, then to Millington, Tennessee, and from there to Hawaii. Once he left home, we never saw him again.
Wow. And now he went missing on November 6th, 1951.
Right.
Do you know when it was how old were you when he left home?
14.
You were 14. Okay. So
Yes.
you're going to remember that then.
Well, I was 13 when he left. I was 14 when we got this news.
14. So you were 13. He went to Hawaii after his training. Of course, the war in Korea was going on at this time.
Right.
Right. What was his work with the Navy?
He was an aviation mechanic.
Okay. And so do you know what that work involved?
No, I don't. It was on the plane.
Okay.
And that was not talked about much.
Right. Okay. And what sort of plane was he serving on when he went missing?
A P-2V-3W Neptune reconnaissance plane.
Do you know basically, I mean, what the mission was of the plane?
No, that's also been a secret all these years.
Okay, and so I'm guessing it's secret. Then I'm guessing that means then the plane was involved in some sort of intelligence gathering,
right,
or something like that. But we don't know specifically what kind.
Right.
What kind of intelligence gathering? Do you know roughly where the plane was when
Well,
it went missing?
That's another mystery. We have gotten very little information from the government about this. It's classified, top secret, security classified.
Still we're speaking in August of 2020.
Right.
And so now, I mean, but do you have a sense of basically geographically where the plane was?
Well, it went down close to Vladivostok.
Close to Vladivostok, Russia.
Right.
Which of course we're in one of the fierce moments of the Cold War.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now we have had several coordinates, but they're all different.
Several coordinates of where the plane was, roughly?
Yes.
But all of the coordinates are they roughly in the same general geographic area?
Generally.
Okay.
But there's some time discrepancies. There's question as to where the plane took off from, at least in my mind at this point. I'm not sure it took off from Atsugi, Japan.
What might the other options be?
Well, I was told by some members of VP6 that there was a RB-47 that was supposed to take off from Alaska.
Okay.
And it accidentally, they put in quotes, caught on fire on the tarmac and was destroyed, and this P-2V took its place. Now, I don't know what the mission of the RB-47 was either.
Yeah. So meaning then that the plane may actually have flown out of Alaska rather than Japan.
Well, I have some questions about that, but it's been documented everywhere I've been. Everything that I've seen on it is at Sugi, Japan.
Now, you said a couple minutes ago that it's still that the plane's mission is still classified.
Yes.
Now, is that something that you have concluded after years of asking questions, or is that something that the government has actually said to you that, look, this is...
I have documents saying it is still classified.
Do you have any idea? So does that mean then that you feel confident that that you have some degree of confidence that there are documents in the archives that if you were able to get to them, you would get some answers to your questions?
I think so, but they are so secret and they're security classified, I don't stand a chance of getting in there. I've tried.
I mean, after all this time, the Cold War is over. What have you been given a reason as to why, even deep into the 21st century now, these documents would remain classified? Has anyone ever given you an explanation of that?
No. They just say it's security classified and I'm not entitled to see it.
Oh, gosh.
There are 10 planes that they know very little about on a list that former President Yeltsin brought the list over. I understand now that in 91, I think, and there are 10 planes. There's 126 airmen still missing from those 10 planes.
You're saying President Yeltsin, when he was the president of the Russian Federation...
He was the former president at that time.
Okay, at that time. And he came to the United States with some information or something about 10 planes?
Yes, he had a list of the 10 planes. This was in early 92, I think, or late 92. He attended a congressional meeting. It was the Senate Select Committee meeting. And he testified at that meeting that there could be some American POWs still living on Soviet soil.
Really?
And that's what got my attention. Big time. That was a small paragraph in our newspaper that he had made that statement. And that's when I started my search.
That's when you started your search. And you said that was 1992?
Yes, late 1992.
Since that time, have you found any corroboration?
Not really.
No.
I've been through a lot of files. I've done a lot of research. I can't come up with anything. This case has become known in writer circles, at least, authors, as the mystery plane.
The mystery plane?
Yes.
Wow. You were 13 when you last saw your brother. Right. Can you describe how did the news come to the family? Your brother the plane goes missing November 6, 1951. How did the news come to the family?
Well, we lived in a very small town. A telegram came up to the railroad station. Yeah. And the station master brought the telegram to my parents. And that's how we found out. And it simply said that he's missing, and it's never been changed since. His status has never changed. Was there any sort of follow-up visit from a chaplain or from... No, there was not. There was nobody to my knowledge. Of course, I had to go to school some days after that. But to my knowledge, there was no one who came to the house to talk with my parents.
I mean, so obviously this is going to have an impact on the family. Yeah,
Right.
obviously. What are some of the words you would use to describe the impact that this had?
Well, I'll just tell you, the day the telegram came, I was in school. I was coming home for lunch. And I saw my father with one foot up on the railing, his elbow on his knee, and his head down. And I immediately knew something was wrong. So I ran the rest of the way and asked what was wrong. And he said, Jack's missing. My mother had already been put to bed and the doctor had been called. And that was the day we found out.
How many other siblings were there?
There were 6 of us kids.
6 kids plus mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Did everything change from that day on?
Pretty much, yes.
How would you describe the change?
We always wondered.
Yeah.
We always thought maybe there was a chance that he survived whatever he was into. And of course, we never heard. He was declared dead November 7th, 52, 1 year and 1 day later. That was a matter of policy, not proof.
Right. Do you think your parents, I mean, was there always a place in their mind where they thought that someday he might show up at the door?
Yes, excuse me. I'm sure they did, because they died at ages 59 and 60.
Oh, gosh.
And that was very soon in terms of years from when they found this out.
Wow. What difference did it make for you? So you're 14, you're coming home from school. Did you return to school that day?
No, I don't think so. I don't really remember, to tell you the truth. That day was very traumatic.
I can imagine.
And I doubt that I went back that day, but we did go later, my siblings and I.
You know, my impression of that time is that was a time where, you know, this is my impression. I didn't live through that time. You do, so you might be able to correct me. But my impression of that time is that it was a time where people were expected to sort of not be too expressive. I think this might especially be true of men, just sort of swallow things and, you know, try to carry on and as normally as possible. Is that an accurate description, do you think? Just sort of a time where emotional or being emotional is not as acceptable as it might be today?
Probably so.
Yeah.
We had a lot of friends, of course, that came in, and a lot of people came to comfort our parents. And, you know, we got through it somehow, but we always thought we might see him again.
Was that a topic of conversation? I mean, would that ever come up, like at the dinner table or something?
At first, but then you get to the place where you don't want to think about it in those terms anymore. But you just get through the day. And he was pretty popular in school. He graduated from a class of 10. I said
Wow.
we had a small town.
Yeah, yeah.
And there were 2 boys in that class, Jack and his friend. And they both ended up joining the Navy.
Yeah. What trying to think of how to formulate the next question. So you describe kind of this traumatic experience when you're 14, and then you describe, and that's 1951. Then we fast forward to 1992, where you read something in a newspaper where Yeltsin says there might be prisoners still held in Russia, and that catches your attention.
Yes.
And you indicated that that's when you began the the project of working on trying to find out
Right.
what happened, which I want to hear from you about that project. But what about the intervening years? I mean, was there how would you describe that intervening time between 1951 when you're 14 and 1992? Where was Jack in your mind?
Well, he
All of
was
that.
always there. He was always there. My father was a coal miner,
Yeah.
and when the coal mines went down, he left town to go to Maryland with his brothers to work for a while. So we traveled back and forth between that and still maintained the home in Pax. So it was a very tough time, but it's similar, I guess, to when any member of your family dies, you have to go on. But the questions were always there.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, because there is, I think now here I'm just speaking as someone looking out. I mean, you obviously, this from your own experience, but I'm guessing that there's something, losing a loved one, losing a family member, losing a brother, especially one so young, there's obvious difficulty that comes along with that. But I imagine that there's added difficulty in lacking, I mean, pretty basic information.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had the oldest brother was in the service also. He was in World War II, and he was wounded 3 times.
Wow.
And then he was discharged. The youngest brother was in service for a small amount of time, but that was not during war.
Yeah. So, so 1992, then you read this news report, and then you begin a process of trying to figure out what happened.
Yes, I started calling my senators in the state. I lived in Delaware at that time. And I just pursued it in every way I could think of with the help of my family.
Yeah.
So I got one report from the Rand Corporation who had a contract with the government, evidently, to investigate these. There was a mention of it, but not a lot of information.
Yeah.
So that was very frustrating. So then I began to branch out. And when I saw the paragraph in the paper, I called DC and the members of government. And they had never called me, even though they should have known by then that Jack was on one of these planes. I didn't receive a call. I called them and just went from place to place on phone calls until I got someone that would offer to help.
Offer to help to look for records, to just find information.
That's what I thought at the time, but I didn't get much information. I had to keep searching that for myself.
So even though a lot of the basic questions remain unanswered, what sort of information were you able to find? I guess another way of asking that question is, how much more do you know today than you knew when you started in 1992?
Well, I know the bureau number of the plane, the type of the plane it was. I didn't even know that at the time. I have found a lot of things that I had to follow up on more closely. I know that it was a mission and that he had arrived at Atsugi, Japan in 1950. Oh, I'm sorry, that was 51. He arrived in Japan in November of 51.
Okay.
And in that length of time, he had already made 20 missions. He was 20 years old. He had made 20 missions.
Wow.
Between the time he arrived in Japan. I said the 1st of November, and I may have misspoke on that one. But he was there for like 20 days. He was 20 years old.
So he's in Japan for a very short period of time, flying a lot of missions. And so you learned a bit about that.
Mm-hmm. But only that, not what the missions were.
Right.
But that he had performed those missions.
So even though you don't know specifically what his specific plane was doing, do you know what kind of missions that plane would, you know what I mean? Like planes serve different purposes. So what sort of purposes would that kind of plane, the P2V-3W Neptune, what sort of missions would that plane fly?
Well, it certainly was not weather missions, as they implied.
So it
was top secret missions.
Yeah.
And that I've never been able to find out. I suspect, well, to be perfectly honest, I think it was intelligence gathering plus.
What do you mean plus?
I think he flew over Russia. I think. I can't prove that.
Right. And is the next step then he flew over Russia? That means he's in Russian airspace. Do you feel it's more likely than not then that he was shot down by Russian other planes or something like that?
I don't know. He was as far as I know, he didn't speak any foreign languages.
Yeah.
I don't know that he was over Russia on this day, but I know planes flew over Russia, especially in the Vladivostok area and around the harbor.
Yeah.
And the mission, I had found out on my own, was taking pictures. They had submarines in the harbor, and they had just opened an airfield, large one, near Vladivostok.
The Russians had?
Yes.
So the Russians had submarines in the area. They had built, you said I'm sorry, was it a Navy port that they'd recently built? Or an airfield, you said?
Yes.
They'd recently built. And so it sounds like you think there's a good chance that the plane was involved in an intelligence gathering operation related to that.
Absolutely.
And so then from the Russian point of view, and if that plane is in Russian airspace from the Russian point of view, then they would see that as a hostile act.
And quite honestly, I think they knew this plane was coming because in some of the research that I've done, it said that several planes made these same missions all the time.
Yeah.
So I think at that point, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do feel that they knew that plane had the latest equipment on it. It had ECM equipment that I know the Russians wanted very much. And if they knew the plane was coming and it was loaded with electronic equipment, I don't know that they would have shot it down. I think maybe it was forced down.
because the Russians want to get their hands on that plane and gather their own intelligence on that.
Yes, the equipment and the crew that could operate it.
Which then I'm assuming, leads you down a train of thought, you can't know, but leads you down a train of thought that perhaps then he was captured.
I think there's a possibility of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that helps me any more than not knowing, because we all know what happens then.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, this is obviously, just, pretty, I'm just, trying to imagine just the difficulty of, of basic questions that are there, and you can surmise and you can put together plausible cases, but in the absence of definite knowledge, then you're in a state of not knowing. Has there been an attempt to get into Russian archives to?
I have petitioned, yes. And I have a document that states that this went all the way to Stalin. The news of this plane, yes, went all the way to Stalin. And I have questioned the Russians maybe 3 or 4 times during this 27 years. I've talked personally with them when they've come to DC. I first met with them in 1993. And that was quite new because I was quite new to this experience of research.
Sure.
And I didn't find out anything there. In fact, they called the plane a B-29 when they read the list.
They called it a B-29.
Yes, and that was common. I understand there was also a picture and a record of planes that they shot down in a hall, like a museum I think it was in Moscow. And it said a B-29. I have a picture here of that on the wall.
Of that plane?
Yes, of someone, no, of the plane listed as B-29.
And is it a B-29?
No, it was a P-2V.
It is. Has this matter? I'm sorry?
It was just a deception that they provided. It nothing that I've been able to get turns out to be extremely factual.
Yeah. Now, of course, there are government, there's a government agency specifically devoted to, accounting for the missing. And then it sounds also like there's a potential, there's something related to diplomacy here as well. So you've been talking about your own efforts. Are you aware of U.S. government agency efforts to try to find out what happened?
Yes, I am. I was around when they started the first one. They've changed the name of it 4 times, but that's about all that's changed, frankly.
This is the agency that sets out to account for the missing.
It started out as Task Force Russia when I started.
Okay.
Then it changed to DPMO, and then DPAA. And at one time, I think there was one more, and it won't come right now, but.
Yeah. But it seems that these agencies haven't been able to, it's apparent these agencies haven't been able to uncover information either for you.
I know they travel a lot. I know they supposedly investigate a lot. But I'm not sure how much and where, because I have the documents on the missions. In fact, a plane made the same mission the day before, and someone did not take the shutter, I think it was called, off the camera to take the pictures. And so this plane went in the next day. And they were flying into there quite often, and it wasn't just Jack's plane, it was other planes.
Yeah.
So it seems to me they knew another one would be there the next day.
The Russians would.
Yes.
Yeah. So are you saying then when they, that, and we've kind of touched on this already, given these facts, that there's information out there, but it's just information that's not either, that is just not accessible for one reason or another. I mean, from the U.S. point of view, it's top secret. Maybe the Russians have information they're not making available. Maybe it's top secret in there. That's kind of what you're suggesting? Is that it? That there's got to be information, but it's just
right. It's not available. Yeah. It's being held somewhere.
Do you?
I think NSA, quite frankly, National Security Agency, has quite a bit on it, but they tell me they don't. I've questioned them. I've gone to NSA. I couldn't tell you how many trips I've gone to DC, but quite a few. And I was instrumental with some other folks who are looking, and we formed a committee, and we got the updates for the families started way back in 1994 or 95, I think. So we do go once a year usually, and there's usually a family meeting that is separate from the general meeting. And you have an opportunity to question, and I certainly question, but I don't get many answers.
And this is you're questioning the agency tasked with accounting for the missing.
Yes. In my case, it's the Cold War.
Yeah, yeah. So are you talking about the annual Korean War missing family members, and then the group? Then right. There's a specific group devoted to questioning about this plane.
Right.
Are you aware of any diplomatic efforts? The relationship between the United States seems to be mostly bad over the years, but there have been moments when it was better. Are you aware of any diplomatic efforts to try to resolve this, and from the State Department or something like that?
Well, sure. They tell me that they go there, they meet with them, and they come over here and meet with our government in D.C.
Yeah.
But I have even asked to attend some of those meetings because it's separated by service and by the missions, I guess. And I haven't been allowed to attend any of their talks.
Mm.
They said it would be a distraction. And I promised to keep very quiet and listen, and I still didn't get to go.
So what is your interpretation of all of this? I mean, when you think about the time and energy, other resources that you put into this project, you've learned a lot, but still the basic questions remain unanswered. How would you what's your own, putting all of this together, what's your own sense of things?
I really don't know. I have a problem with that because I know there's an answer. And if it's not, then it's disgraceful that they would send these men out on such dangerous missions and not keep track. This plane, all they had to do, any member of the crew could hit a button and send a distress signal. Nothing, they say, was ever heard. There was also 2 radar plots for this mission, I have found out. And one was for the public, and one was secret.
One was for the public.
Right, that they went out on a mission. I have a letter from one of the guys from the ACE, 411th, I think, ACNW radar group.
Yeah.
And he states this. I've had a lot of cooperation from other service members that I have contacted, or they have contacted me as a result of this, because I've put it out everywhere that I could to get people to read it, and I've had a lot of responses and a lot of offers to try to help.
Yeah.
So they have the same results that I do when they try. Nothing.
Now, the photo that's next to you, that's of your brother there, and just tell us, because I think this relates to what you're just saying. You get responses to things, and people are helpful to the extent they can be. I think that the photo next to you there falls into that category, right? Of someone who.
Right.
Yeah. What is the story behind that photo there?
This one?
Yeah, the photo of your brother there.
Okay. This came from one of his friends. I had posted information online on the Korean War Project page.
Mm.
And this man wrote back to me, and because I had listed on there, on my plea for help, I think, that I didn't even have a picture of Jack in uniform.
Wow.
And this man answered that. It turned out to be a friend of his.
Mm.
And he told me he had a picture
Wow.
of Jack, that he was his friend. And it was in storage. He had just moved, and it was in storage at his old residence, and that he would get that and get it to me. And that's the result.
Wow.
That was a beautiful picture.
And he sent that photo to you, and now you have it.
Yes.
And here's what you wrote in a note I received earlier today. You said, "I look at it every day, and sometimes it seems I could almost talk to him."
Yes. The picture is so real to me.
Mm.
And he's even smiling. And he was a jokester.
Yeah. Yeah, tell us a little bit about him. I mean, what was he like as a person?
Well, he was very responsible. He was the oldest brother at home, who lived at home at that time.
Yeah.
And he was responsible for getting our first telephone put in.
Mm.
Like I said, we're a small town, and some folks had them, some folks didn't.
Yeah.
But he had one in our house. And of course, my parents probably paid for it, but he made all the arrangements and insisted that they get one.
Sure.
He got our first little brownie box camera.
Hmm.
And had us all take pictures. We learned to load the film and so forth on that.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very good person. He helped my mother work in the garden, and she used to love pansies. And she would plant a large bed of pansies in our yard every year, and he would help her with that a lot.
Wow.
Dig up the dirt for her. And he liked to laugh. He liked to have a good time.
Mm.
He convinced my mother one time to let him take me up to a dance at our school.
Mm.
The school was very small, but we had a junior high and high school in one building and elementary in the other. And at lunchtime, all of us that were interested in dancing, they turned the jukebox on in the auditorium. And all of us who couldn't go in would go and look through the door and watch the other kids dance that were older than we were.
Mm-hmm.
So he convinced her at one time to let him take me to the dance, and he did.
Wow.
And I barely remember it because I was so excited.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point he came over and bowed very gallantly and asked me to dance.
Wow.
And then after that, he took me home so he could enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. And how old were you?
Probably about 12.
Wow. Yeah.
But he was a thoughtful person. He was very good to all of us, and he helped Mother and Dad a lot. He helped Dad when he had part-time work if the mines were closed, which he always did. He did a lot of carpentry work, and he drove lumber trucks and coal trucks, and Jack learned to drive good, and he helped him with that a lot. So we were a pretty close-knit family.
Yeah. You said in the note that you said when you look at the picture every day and you say, sometimes it seems I could almost talk to him. So you say almost.
Yes.
But
And maybe he would ask, maybe he would say something to me, I guess, is what I was hoping. I know that sounds ridiculous, but, you know, it's such a good picture of him, and it's just like he was. And that's all I have left that really I can go to anytime I want to and look at it.
No, I don't think that sounds ridiculous at all. And in fact, I was going to ask, and I mean, perhaps you do, you know, I mean, in a sense, you know, try to communicate with him. Of course, people have different ideas about that kind of thing. But let's say, you know, that we're in a, you know, some sort of circumstance where you could be certain that for a moment he could hear you. What would you say to him today?
I have no idea.
No.
It would have to be spontaneous and maybe something funny.
Yeah.
That's just the way he was.
Yeah. Is that something that he would say to you, or that your response to him would be the same?
Well, he always called me sis. That was my name because I was the oldest daughter. There were 4 boys and 2 girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he always looked out for all of us. I don't know that he would say, he would probably try to reassure me that everything was okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know that. There's no way I would know.
Sure. Yeah. There's no way. No. What about if you had the opportunity to say something to him?
Come home.
Yeah. What does that mean to you when you, of course, when you say that has a whole lot of meaning in your own mind. What does that mean to you, that phrase, spoken to him, come home?
Well, I would like to have him alive, of course, but I don't think that would ever be the case. I don't expect him to still be there. But I would like to have his remains. At least I'd have something.
Yeah.
My brother placed a stone, a memorial stone, between my mother and Dad. But we know that's empty. It's just there as a remembrance. We'd like to have something. I still want to know what happened to him. I have a lot of information gathered here and there, and mostly by me, but I still don't have the answer of what happened to him. And that's what I'd like to know.
So come home means, you know, we want some
Closure.
I'm sorry?
Some form of closure. If that's a word that's used, it may mean different things to different people, but at least I would feel, if I feel very confident that was him or his remains, then that's about all I could expect.
Yeah.
But I would have to feel confident. There have been mistakes made.
Yeah. Well, Pat Dickinson, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about Jack and to describe your own story, which is obviously a difficult one. And I suppose like the story itself, it's hard to know how to end, how to close, other than to
Right.
say. But
Well,
yeah,
there have been a few incidents that there's been some evidence that Americans were seeing, and that is Hospital 404 near Vladivostok. There were 4 prisoners in there in a hospital hallway, and Mr. Chutsenko testified. He was a Russian who was in the area. He had been in the hospital at the same time, and he had made a parachute jump for a superior and injured his leg and ended up in the hospital. And he did testify that there were 4 prisoners, and one was burned so badly that there was no hope. Another one was being fed daily, but nothing. Only one could speak, and he named 4 cities that he had heard mentioned. Mr. Chutsenko testified the 4 cities, and the 4 cities corresponded to the guys on this plane. And they went from there, and it was reported that there was a 5th American who was buried in the cemetery. And we've had quite an investigation on that. Nothing has ever been determined, but it was quite a coincidence that those 4 cities was mentioned by the prisoner that was the Russian that was in the hospital.
yeah. And this injury of this Russian who's in the hospital, and then reports that he saw 4 American prisoners who named who named American cities. This
Right.
took place right around the same time, November 51.
November 51, yes. One was reportedly buried in the cemetery nearby. And we have had 2 excavations, or we've had 1 excavation. We've had 2 more trips to investigate. I was told that the bones that they exhumed from that first visit was of Oriental nature. And we've been promised that they'll go back to the cemetery, and they have been back a couple of times. They've even found some anomalies in a place that they were directed to look. They did a lot of testing, and so far, every time they plan a trip to go back, I'm told that the Russians all of a sudden say that they have not gained the permission needed for them to excavate.
This would be members of the responsible U.S. agency looking for the missing. They want to go back, but they report, then
Right.
the Russians say they're not given permission.
And that has happened about 3 times.
Okay.
And I don't know why
Yeah.
permission has not been given. That, to me, is a little suspicious.
Yeah. So when we read in the newspapers about, relationship between the United States and Russia, I imagine that, you hear that news in a way most Americans don't, right? Because the relationship between the 2 countries has implications for Jack's case.
In the report that the U.S. received, 2 of the 4 prisoners, 1 was burned so badly that there was no hope. Another one was being fed daily, but nothing. One was burned so badly that there was no hope. And the report that the U.S. received, 2 of the 4 prisoners, 1 was burned so badly that there was no hope. this was many years ago,
Yeah.
that this had gone straight to Stalin. They had written up a report to send back that was based on a protocol in that report to Stalin. It was protocol number 84. They took the context of what they wrote to us out of that, and they said it was paragraph 212, and that was the official notice in government documents. So I have questioned that. As I stated before, I have spoken directly with the Russians on at least 3, maybe 4 occasions, and I always questioned that. And the last time we met with them, I think it was 2017, I think, and that was in DC. And I asked about that because they had the Russian researchers there. And I asked where they had researched and where were they planning to research. When they mentioned all the way to the presidential archives, I asked if they did research in the archives, would they please look at protocol number 84 and specifically paragraph 312. I haven't heard a word from anybody. Not our government nor theirs.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, Pat Dickinson, I appreciate you taking the time to share this with us, and yeah, it's just, you even want to end a discussion like this on something definite, but I guess it's just the nature of this case that
I don't have anything definite. I'm sorry. I truly wish I did.
And
I have put, I honestly have provided much more information to the government agencies than they've ever provided to me for my research.
Yeah.
In fact, in January of 1952, just a couple months after this shoot down, I have a document that the U.S. presented a document to the Russians questioning this crew. All 10 crewmen's names were on that document that they supposedly presented to the Russians.
Yeah.
And I've never gotten anywhere with that either, even though I've pointed it out over and over. They just haven't found anything. I don't think, well, I would hope that they would have documented a lot more about these planes and their crews, where they were. And I know that was documented. That was service. That was military documents.
Yeah.
I don't think that they've been destroyed. I do know that they had kind of secret archives, that one member that I know of the plane that went down in 1953 had found a box in that archive that was about his father. And they closed that down in a hurry. I've never gotten to go there yet. I can't even think of the name of it right now, but I do know it. It just won't come to me at the moment.
Right. Yeah.
And I knew I had met and spoken with the man in charge of that several times, and they would not let me go and look. But again, it was nothing in there supposedly about my case. I had authors. The guy that dubbed this mystery plane was an author who had just written a book. And I went to a meeting in D.C. and they were speaking. There were two authors. And they were speaking, and I caught one at the elevator after the meeting was over and asked him specifically about this plane because they had mentioned it in the book. And he said, "Oh, that's the mystery plane." And I believe he's right.
Yeah.
I have had a lot of help of friends that have really tried to help me, people that I didn't know before. I just met at a meeting or contacted them. If I came up with a name, I contacted them and asked them if they had any information about this case. And a lot of them are still good friends today, and they're still looking. They're keeping an eye out. So I have done the best I can do to find out what I need to know. And I think every family member would want to know what happened. If someone in your close family was killed in an automobile accident, you would want to know how that happened and where.
Yeah.
And it's the same principle. So I'm really disappointed in DPAA. We have a lot of promises, but they're just not providing the information. And I sincerely think they know. And if they don't know, they should know. There should be documents on every case. If the government's going to send someone out to do these dangerous missions, they certainly should keep track and be accountable. So I've met a lot of friends, maybe made a few enemies. I don't know. I didn't set out to make any enemies, but I do try to be honest. And I'm very disappointed.
Just to get us back to where we were near the beginning, I'm gathering the disappointment is because you feel confident the information's there.
Yes.
Not able to get your hands on it.
Right. I have also contacted my senator's office, and I was told recently that they didn't have anything on it. They couldn't get anything on it. And it was Senator Manchin from West Virginia, and he was a member of the USRJC at one time. I'm not sure if he's still on that or not, but he was on it enough to know possibly how to get the information. All I think it needs is President Trump to declassify the documents. They're 69 years old.
Yeah.
What difference does it make? The excuses I get is to protect their sources and methods.
But that's pretty old, though.
Yes, I tell them if they haven't changed their methods and sources by now, they're probably expired by now.
That's a fair point. Yeah, if the sources and methods haven't been changed since 1951, then there's
right. Right. And that's really basically all I've had. It's just a brick wall. And there's a lot in this DPAA, DPMO that know me personally because I made my own trips to DC a lot too.
Yeah.
I would call and say I need an appointment, or sometimes I would just say I'll be there at this point.
Yeah.
And so I made the trips at my own expense. I did the research at my own expense. I had a lot of help from my husband, my children, and grandchildren. And some of those attend the meetings with us every year when they had them. So I'm not going to go away. I would like to have some answers, and I think that every family member who lost someone deserves answers.
Well, I hear you. I appreciate your your perseverance. I don't know that this discussion will, I mean, I don't know that it can advance anything, but if it possibly can, I hope it does. Um, it's hard to know, usually I'm pretty good at knowing how to wrap things up. I am at a bit of a loss here, but just given the situation, the question marks that hang over everything. But I do want to, thank you very much for taking this time. I wish you all the best. I hope, if it's right that there are documents. It is mystifying to me that they would still be secret after all this time. So I would hope that can become available, so that you can know.
We just need someone to declassify it.
Yeah.
If they exist, we need them declassified. What is the holdup after all these years? What are they hiding?
Yeah. Well, thank you again for taking this time. Thanks for telling us about Jack, and thank you for sharing this this story. I think if nothing else, that your story sends a message to people about the potential cost of service, not of military service, not only in time away from family, and your brother was away from family, not only potentially even in being wounded or killed in combat, but there are costs from the world of war that go on and on and on. And here we're talking about a cost from the world of war that continues, all these many decades later.
Yes.
And if nothing else, it accentuates that point, that war is a costly thing, and the costs of it go on and on and on. Yeah.
Well, my one last point, and I will be quiet then.
Yeah.
I just don't know why they don't release the information, because I know it's there. I just don't know where it is. I think it's unfair to put families through this, especially there are some people who have accepted it, and I give them credit for that. That's wonderful if they can do that. I'm just one that can't do that under the circumstances.
Yeah.
So I thank you for doing the interview and for having me. So we'll go from there.
Yeah.
And I'll keep trying. And if I never find out, I will know I did the very best I could.
Yeah. I hear that. I hear you, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you've done and what you're going to continue to do. And I wish you all the best. I thank you for, making this contribution to the story we're trying to tell of, the big story is the world of war, and so mostly I interview combat veterans, But
Right.
part of the world of war is that there's some who don't come home. And then there are all the repercussions of that on the family. And I appreciate you contributing to the telling of that part of the story as well.
Right. May I just say one more thing, please?
Yes, please do.
The planes that you see above me,
Yeah.
a good friend of mine ordered the models, put them together. That's Jack's plane is the large one, and it's supposed to be the LA-11 model that shot it down. And he brought it to DC and gave it to me at a meeting.
Wow. Yeah.
I have a lot of friends that are still looking, that are still watching for anything they can pick up. It's just amazing. The flags up there was given to me by the two sisters of the navigator of this plane. And the other one was from a memorial service in Hawaii of VP6, and they sent me the flag that they clue during the ceremony. And I really appreciate all the friends and people who've tried to help me too.
Yeah. Well, Pat Dickinson, thank you very much for this time. I really appreciate it, and I do wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.